The radical. Fundamental principles of freedom, rational self-interest, and individual rights. This is the Yaron Brook Show.
All right, everybody, welcome to Yaron Brook Show on this Tuesday afternoon. A little behind, I guess, in terms of the timing, but here we are. Let's see, my super chat tracker is not working. Let's see if we can get it to work. All right, I think it'll work. All right, we're gonna cover a bunch of stories. Of course, whatever you guys want to talk about, super chat is open. So feel free to ask questions, use stickers to support the show, you know the drill. But the main thing is ask questions. You get to basically determine the program, depending on the kind of questions, quality of the questions, and everything else. That's what I'll talk about. I always follow your lead, right? All right. Just the update. I guess we're going to do this every show on Biden. Back and forth. Biden basically keeps saying, I am not leaving. I am running for president. I can beat Trump. There's no way I'm leaving. More and more people within the Democratic Party are saying, no, he's got to leave. Biden doesn't give a shit. He doesn't care. He's president, so he can do what he wants. And it's kind of a stalemate. I think the consensus is somebody's going to have to talk him out of it. Somebody's going to have to convince him he shouldn't do this. And it's not clear who that could be. Probably have to be his wife at the end of the day. But it's not clear that she wants to. The people around him, like the positions they're in, they've got nothing to gain by telling him that he needs to leave. They've got nothing to gain by him being replaced. They probably will lose their jobs anyway. So might as well ride the ship and hope for a miracle, and you know, maybe he somehow wins. Nothing's. I see a lot of people kind of speculating what we do, who's the candidate, who's going to replace him. I think everybody's kind of realizing, begrudgingly, that they probably don't have any choice, but it's going to be Kamala Harris. That really, they can't find a way out of it. There's no real easy way to replace her. And then, even though I think that the most reasonable alternative from the Democrats' perspective, the one that would get them, I think, the most excitement is the governor of Michigan and Josh Shapiro from Pennsylvania as her VP. That's two swing states, both Pennsylvania and Michigan. Both won elections by pretty easy. Whitmer is not considered a crazy left, although those of you who live in Michigan might have different views. But Whitmer and Shapiro would probably be the best in terms of electability. But the reality is that I think there's a significantly greater than 50% chance. I still think it's 70, 80% that Biden just hangs on. He just hangs on. I mean, he takes naps and he goes to sleep early, but he just hangs on until the election, and he is the nominee. Hard to believe. But every week that passes that they haven't replaced Biden makes it more difficult to replace Biden, because it makes it, whoever replaces him has a lot, less time to then run a campaign. They can wait until the convention, but the reality is that the convention is late. The convention's in August. And Republican convention is next week. That'll be fun. But the convention is in August, and That's late. They'll have September, October to run a presidential campaign with a new candidate, get named. I mean, the one thing that Whitmer doesn't have going for her is that she has no name recognition. Nobody knows who she is. So she would have to really spend a lot of money on ads. I don't know which Democrat has name recognition. AOC. But they're not going to nominate her. So, yeah, it's Democrats have put themselves into an impossible corner. They should have done this discussion a year ago. It's too late now. Everybody was terrible during COVID. Who wasn't terrible during COVID? Particularly Democrats. But everybody was awful during COVID. Every single one of them. I mean, if we go by COVID, then I'd vote for the governor of Georgia. Governor of Georgia opened up before Florida, before Texas, before any of them. And famously, you guys don't remember it, but I do, because I have TDS, I remember these things. Donald Trump lambasted him. How dare he open? How dare he open before the federal government gave him a green light? How dare he do that? So that's why I mean, generally, I think that the governor of Georgia is probably one of the more reasonable Republicans out there, and would be not bad. But he has no. But there is nobody on COVID. Nobody on COVID that was good on the Democratic side. Any chance of a third party coming to the forefront? No. There's no chance. I mean, RFK, who has the name recognition, is a complete nutcase, and but he could do okay, but I don't think he's going to change the election dramatically, and he can't win, and he won't even win a single delegate. He's a complete nutcase, and. Yeah, Joe Manchin is terrible, but of the Democrats, he's probably as good as you're going to get, but no Democrat's going to vote for Joe Manchin. He's left the Democratic Party anyway. No, we're stuck with Biden. Your choice is Biden-Trump. This is the choice that that God has given us. All right, let's see. So that's where we are with the election. Nothing new. I keep reading, anticipating some breakthrough, but nobody. Frank is obsessed with Joe Manchin. I have no idea why. He's not very good. But so be it. If you're going to obsess about something, at least obsess about somebody who's actually good. All right, let's talk a little bit about, there's not a lot of news out there. I mean, we get to there's not a lot of really that juicy, interesting stuff going on, at least not big time. So we're going to talk about a bunch of different things, but let's start with Israel, because that's where there is some news in Israel. So I think we all know, I think we discussed this, that Hamas has basically said, okay. We give up on our demand that Israel withdraw completely and stop all the fighting. We're willing to have a ceasefire. And some emails have been released, emails that it looks like senior commanders on the ground in Gaza were sending the political leadership of Hamas, basically where the fighters on the ground are saying, look, we're being decimated here. We're being crushed. We're being destroyed. You've got to give us a ceasefire. We need a ceasefire. We cannot continue like this. And I think that is the reality. That once Israel went into Rafah and demolished one of the last places where Hamas was still free to operate, they are cornered now. They are panicking. The destruction, the physical destruction of infrastructure, buildings in Gaza is just horrific. There's almost nothing standing. And they have lost, hard to tell, anywhere from a third to 50% of their manpower, probably closer to 50% if you account for the injured and the prisoners. They probably lost over 50% of their manpower. And they are panicking. There's good reason to believe that Israel knows where Sinwar is. There's good reason to believe Israel knows where most of the hostages are, at least the ones that are alive. And Israel's not doing anything for fear of getting the hostages killed. So there's probably good reason to believe that they are slowly closing in on those locations and about to strangle them. Sinwar, the leader of Hamas, is in hiding. He's been in hiding since the beginning. And it looks like the political leadership of Hamas in Qatar is ignoring him. He wants to keep on fighting. Not that he's doing any fighting, he's just in hiding. But it looks like the political leadership of Hamas is willing to ignore him and basically cut a deal with Israel. Israel looks like it's willing to cut a deal, partially. If it cuts a deal with Hamas, Hezbollah said that it too would stop the fighting, the shooting. Israel basically faces a choice right now. It has to either cut a deal with Hamas, or it needs to complete the job in the Gaza Strip, and it needs to invade Lebanon. This government, I've told you, Netanyahu from the beginning, is weak. This government is pathetic, worse than pathetic. I mean, the more I read about this government, the more I want to throw up. I mean, they're so disgusting. Everything I said about Netanyahu is true and in many respects worse than what I thought. As I told you, right in the beginning of this war, they should have launched preemptive strikes on Hezbollah. They should have invaded Lebanon and Gaza at the same time. They should have done that with massive force, not considering the Biden, not considering the global community, not considering anybody. They should have done it in the first week when they had international support behind them. And they should, and by then they could have completely crushed the Hezbollah and Hamas, and it would have been all over 6 months ago. Instead, they're in a quagmire. They're in Gaza. They're destroying Hamas, but it's slow. It's taking forever. The world is pissed off and on their back and unhappy. We've basically, I don't know if you know this, but basically, the very north of Israel is being evacuated. So all the civilians who used to live in the towns and cities on the very north of Israel have all been put up in hotels in the center of Israel. And basically, people's lives have been completely disrupted for 9 months now. I mean, I can't think of a bigger default on a government's responsibility, right? October 7th, the biggest default. This, the second biggest default. A government is there to preserve security. It's there to maintain the safety of its citizens. It's not there to evacuate them. Basically, Israel has ceded territory to Hezbollah, given Hezbollah the north of Israel. Now, Hezbollah doesn't occupy it, but it, might as well, because Israelis cannot function freely there. So, it's completely nuts. And the situation is not getting better. Israel, the Netanyahu government does not want to go to war in Lebanon. In the meantime, it has its own disputes internally. We talked about drafting the ultra-Orthodox. But also, the government is spending, like the Israeli economy is in a massive recession. Massive recession. Why? Because the most productive people in the Israeli economy right now are basically in Gaza, fighting. The high-tech entrepreneurs, the programmers, the biotech engineers, they're in uniform with, guns and tanks and special forces units fighting in Gaza. They're not building, creating, making stuff. And in the north of Israel, it's been evacuated. So the people who are working there are now sitting in hotels. So you've basically got a situation where the Israeli economy is really collapsing. And government spending is going through the roof. And because they're paying people's hotel rooms for the evacuees, they're paying for all the soldiers that in Gaza are getting paid something. They're getting compensated for their reserve duty. So the government is spending like crazy, like during COVID, right? But production has collapsed. And on top of that, the government continues to pay, I don't know, what's the best way to call this, bribes to the ultra-Orthodox anti-Israeli population that will not serve in the military and demands constant welfare subsidies. Subsidies for their educational institutions so their kids can go study there instead of going into the army. Subsidies for families where the men don't work. They don't work. They go to yeshiva to study all day. They don't work until the age at least of 40. The Israeli government subsidizes them. I mean, the Israeli government. Israelis, the productive sector in Israel, subsidizes the largest unproductive sector in the whole state, which is the ultra-Orthodox Jews. At least the Arab population doesn't go to the army and is working. God. In Israel. And right now they're fighting over a bill that would give them even more money. And the fight is not even on principle. It's about who gets in what cabinet. I mean, the absurdity, the ridiculous nature of Israeli politics. And Netanyahu is so incompetent. I mean, I don't have the words to describe and convince Americans who've been enamored by his speeches on how bad this guy is, how much of a monster he is, how much of an unprincipled, power-lusting pragmatist he is. And that almost anybody, his clerk, would be a better prime minister than Netanyahu is today. And even though it's in the midst of a war, of course Scott likes him. Scott's, as usual, ignorant and obsessed with him not being left. Even in this midst of a war, elections should be held. This guy was responsible for October 7th. It was under his watch, not just his imminent watch, but 14, 15 years of being prime minister, his watch. He's the one who did not defeat Hamas on the several opportunities that he has. He's the one that did not defeat Hezbollah. He is responsible of any of the generals who've already resigned, as responsible of any politician in all of history for the consequence of allowing one's enemy to gain that kind of strength, to achieve the kind of power that would eviscerate your own people. Not to see him as responsible is to blind yourself from the fact that Israel has made itself weak, and that is what allowed Hamas to do what it did. Now, somebody like Scott sees Biden's weakness. Oh, it's Biden's fault that Russia invaded Ukraine because we retreated from Afghanistan. It's Biden's fault that Hamas attacked Israel because the West is weak, right? Because it's always the left's fault. It's just, God, that was even dumber, Scott, than your usual comments, which were beneath contempt generally. Right? He gave them peace from 2007? Really? How many wars has Israel fought since 2007? How many wars has Israel lost since 2007? You're just multiplying your ignorance. How many rockets have been fired into Israel since 2007? How many rockets? How many times have you had to run into an air raid shelter since 2007? Oh, I forgot. You haven't. That's right. Because you sit here comfy and pretend that you have any clue about what's going on over there. God. Anyway, Israel looks like it's going to compromise because that's what Netanyahu does. It looks like it will cut a deal. There's even discussion right now, and Israel and international mediators are discussing how Israel could leave the Philadelphia corridor, the corridor that is the border between Gaza and Egypt, through which the Gazans smuggled in the weapons and smuggled in everything else, and they in and out of from Egypt into Gaza. Israel took that corridor. They should have taken it the first week. They took it a few, what was it, a month or two ago. They're now going to retreat from that corridor. And they are talking to the Egyptians that how the Egyptians, and maybe with some sophisticated American technology, will guarantee that Hamas will not smuggle weapons in through that border. The Egyptians have always provided that guarantee. The Egyptians have always promised the Israelis. And it is the Netanyahu government for 17 years that has known that weapons are being smuggled in from Egypt into Gaza, and they have done nothing. They have not called the Egyptians on it, and they have not taken out the tunnels themselves. It is the Netanyahu government that knew that the that the Gazans were building tunnels everywhere, throughout, and did nothing about it. Zero, zilch, nada. Anyway, Israel is actually considering leaving the Philadelphia corridor and putting their trust in the Egyptians again. I mean, this is so pathetic. So pathetic that it's hard for me to imagine. I interviewed on my show in Hebrew on Sunday. I interviewed an Israeli politician. What was her name? Sharon, I think Sharon Eskel, who's in the kind of secular right-wing opposition to the Netanyahu government, and she was scathing. She used to be in the same political party with Netanyahu. She was in the Likud. She was an MP under Netanyahu. She's still an MP, but in a different political party. Her analysis of Netanyahu and this government was just scathing. It was so good to hear an Israeli politician who is not, let's say, of the left and is not of some wacky, crazy religious right, actually go after him and his government and everything that they have done. Literally she said, everything they have done, militarily and economically, since October 7th has been wrong. Weak, pathetic. They have spent money. They have spent it on stupid things. When I asked her, what would you have done differently in terms of the economics, she said, I would have done everything the opposite of what the government did. It would have been better. And then she said, not attacking Hezbollah, not unleashing everything we had on Gaza was a massive mistake. I thought she was pretty amazing. So I'm a fan. The interview is in Hebrew. It's on the Yaron Brook Show channel. It's from Sunday. Anyway, you can probably find her Sharen, S-H-A-R-E-N, Haskel, H-A-S-K-E-L, I think. You can find her on Twitter. She's very, very good. I don't know how often she tweets in English, but she was really good. Anyway, Netanyahu has to go. He has to go. He's more destructive to Israel than Biden has ever been. Biden has ever been. So now I've known Shirley Esquel for a long time. We've met in the past. She's always been fairly good on economic issues, but I didn't know she was this good on security issues. But she was exceptional. So maybe there's some hope for Israel with the next generation of politicians. But one thing is essential in Israeli politics. Israel cannot mature, cannot survive the current crisis, cannot move forward unless Netanyahu is eliminated from the Israeli political scene. He is poison. Again, I can't express how strongly I think this, and I think this is true now of most rational Israelis, both on the right, the center, and the left. Those demonstrations you see in Tel Aviv to do away with this government, that is not the left. There basically is no left in Israel. The left in Israel is very small. That is not the left. Those are rational people who want to get rid of this disastrous, religionist, power-lusting government that has been and is a disaster for the state of Israel, and that does not have the courage, not have the backbone, not have the integrity to resign, given how pathetic they have been. Simi says, my dad used to be a Netanyahu devotee for over 20 years. He absolutely hates him now. I think that's very, very common in Israel. I think a lot of the people who follow Netanyahu, who adore Netanyahu, who are fans of Netanyahu, have now just finally, I saw through him in the 1990s, but have finally seen through him and seen how pathetic and how anti-Israeli he really is, how completely devoted he is to power, and nothing else matters to him. Nothing else matters to him. All right, let's see. Was there anything else I want to say about Israel? No. Okay, Ukraine. You probably saw the story of a Russian KH-101 cruise missile today, this morning, I think, or maybe it was yesterday, hit a children's hospital, the largest children's hospital in Ukraine. This one was in the center of Kiev. This was part of a huge missile strike against critical Ukrainian infrastructure throughout the day. It was yesterday, July 8th. Russian forces, used missile strikes. They used cruise missiles. They used ballistic missiles. They also used drones to attack targets all over Ukraine. Ukraine air defense systems shot down some of these, but some of them got through, and obviously one of them got through and hit the children's hospital, where there are significant casualties. At least 22 dead and 74 injured. That is in Kiev itself. There are many more dead and injured in other places around Ukraine. What Ukraine needs in terms of weapon systems right now is a lot more air defense systems. What we saw when Iran attacked Israel is that if you have the right kind of air defense systems, you can basically knock anything that the Russians fly at you out of the sky. They need a lot more Patriot batteries. I think they're getting them from some of their neighbors. The Ukrainians just signed a defense agreement with Poland. What they really need is for Israel to be in a position to be able to send them some of the excess units, or the Israeli defense industry to start building Arrow and Iron Dome and every other form of missile defense system that Israel can build for the Ukrainians. Israel made a huge strategic mistake at the beginning of the Ukraine war by not taking a side and by refusing to sell Ukraine weapon systems out of fear of upsetting the Russians. Israel should have never worried about the Russians, should have told the Russians to go to hell, and should have sided with Ukraine unequivocally and supplied them with the weapons they need in order to defend themselves. In the meantime, the war on the ground. So Russia sends hundreds of these missiles in. Ukraine can't shoot them all down. They shoot a lot of them down. Can't shoot a lot of them down, and they're doing a lot of damage. A lot of the infrastructure associated with electricity production is down in Ukraine. Energy is there's real rationing going on, and we're now in the summer. It's going to get much worse in the winter, and they don't have the capacity to defend airspace. Now, I'm still waiting for the deployment of F-16s. It is really interesting that it's taking a very long time for the Ukrainian Air Force to train F-16 pilots. They have the planes, they have pilots, but they're none being deployed yet. They keep saying, "Oh, soon the F-16s will be deployed." It's bizarre that it's not happening. I'm not sure why it's not happening. What exactly is the holdup? It could be that the Ukrainian pilots just need more training because of the differences between flying a MiG and flying the much more advanced technologically F-16. But I just don't understand it. It just seems bewildering right now that we're not seeing F-16s in the air in Ukraine. I don't know if any of you Eastern Europeans have more insight into what is going on there and what is the cause. But yeah, that is where we are. So again, air superiority. Nobody's really flying over Ukraine, but the missiles, the Russian missiles. Now, one of the main reasons for this, for basically the ability of the Russians to do this uninterrupted, is the fact that the cowardly Biden administration refuses to allow the Ukrainians to use U.S.-supplied weapon systems to attack bases, launch sites, even airfields where Russian bombers are sitting. They refuse to allow these weapons to be used to attack those locations. So the Russians can place relatively short-term and medium missiles in areas fairly close to the Ukrainian border and not worry about the Ukrainians bombing the shit out of them. And I think that is particularly true of certain missiles that the United States has provided the Ukrainians that could hit targets all across the region. Kudababa says no aircraft seem to be efficient in that conflict. No aircraft in the conflict seem to be efficient in the conflict. That's right. The MiG-29s, MiG-whatevers are not efficient in that conflict, but that should not be true, and I do not believe it is true. With regard to U.S. planes with U.S. technology, which would dominate the skies in Ukraine, and particularly if they were willing to fly them into Russian territory, would crush Russian forces on the border. I don't think the SAM batteries that the Russians have would actually survive, the best American and Israeli technology in an F-16 or even better in F-35. But even if the Ukrainians were just allowed to use their missiles and hit the installations the Russians have on the border, they would do so much damage and they would gain such a huge advantage. It would basically be a game changer. And yet the Biden administration, out of pure cowardice, will not allow them to be used. It's just, again, unbelievable how pathetic or how absent a strategy is. There's just no strategy from the Biden administration in terms of this conflict or any other conflict. They just don't know what they're doing. They don't know what they're doing. As a consequence, what we have now is an attrition war between the Ukrainians and the Russians. Everybody's moving a few inches here, a few inches there. Russians gained a little bit in the east. The Ukrainians are taking back the areas that the Russians gained earlier in the spring in the Kharkiv area. The Russians are going to be kicked out of the Kharkiv area very soon here. But the Russians are making progress in Donetsk, but very small progress. And at the cost of thousands and thousands and thousands of kids. It's just unbelievable the amount of casualties that the Russian forces are taking and just willing to absorb them. For what? What is the goal? What is the purpose? What are they achieving? Can any one of those soldiers tell you what they are fighting for, never mind what they are dying for? Not a single one of them can tell you that. Certainly not they're fighting and dying for freedom. All right, let's see. I think that covers Ukraine. Some quick stories from other parts around the world. China. This is underreported, and I don't see many stories about that. One story in the Economist, but I really don't see much being reported in the United States. But the reality is that, we talked about this maybe a year ago, maybe 6 months ago. We talked about the real estate crisis in China, how many of the real estate developers, both housing and commercial real estate developers, primarily housing, in China were going bankrupt, were going bust, defaulting on their bonds, being restructured, recapitalized by the government, bailouts, all of this stuff happening in the commercial real estate, in the real estate sector. But then, of course, behind the real estate sector are banks. Banks, of course, are the ones who give the real estate loans, both to people to buy the property and for companies to build the property. And what we're have seen over the last couple of years, is massive defaults here. Defaults both from people who put money down in order to buy a place, but now cannot. Maybe the building is not being completed, so they're not paying anything more. Or they bought the place, but now it's worth half, and they're just walking away from their mortgage. They don't want to pay the mortgage on something, on a real estate property whose price has collapsed. We saw this during the financial crisis in the United States. People walked away from mortgages and handed those mortgages to the banks, and that created a massive banking crisis. Well, what's going on in China and not being reported is that there is a massive banking crisis right now. There's something on the scope of, according to one article, 3,800 troubled banks with about $7.5 trillion in assets, which is 13% of the total banking system. So that's more than 10% of the total banking system is in trouble. All of this is being mismanaged. Some Chinese banks have revealed that up to 40% of their loan book, of their loan portfolio, is non-performing. That is, people are not paying on the loans. Just in the last few weeks, 40 banks have basically disappeared, closed down, shut down, no word from them. 36 of them in one province, somehow absorbed into some big bank, backed by the government. So we've got one big, really, really bad bank that owns all the assets of all these little bad banks. And, this is only getting worse. The government cannot admit that it's facing a financial crisis. It tries to use back channels or any way it can to resurrect, to provide more capital, to resurrect the banks in one way or another. But that's not enough. It's not enough. They've tried a whole variety of reforms and consolidation. Really, this has been going on now for 5 years, probably since 2019, when the Chinese economy started slowing down. Even before COVID, it started slowing down. So it's, you're seeing real challenges, real problems. This is part of what I think a massive slowdown and a massive deterioration in the economic prospects of China. China will not grow the way people expected it to. China is not going to be the kind of economic superpower that people expected it to be. And that is because it's a centrally planned, centrally organized, authoritarian state and is becoming more so, not less so. And the more it becomes, the less of an issue it will be. Nobody ultimately wants to hold yuan when yuans are being printed in order to bail out all these entities. The country's in real problems, and whether that manifests itself in stagnation, it's certainly going to manifest itself in slower growth, and it could manifest itself in dramatically slow growth. So I guess we will basically wait and see how this evolves, what happens here, and what are going to be the consequences to the rest of the world. I mean, everybody believes, there's this weird belief out there that if China falters, we benefit. And when China does well, we lose. There's a real zero-sum view of economic globalization. And that is, basically ignorant. It ignores the reality of the benefits of trade and the benefits of the division of labor, the benefits of specialization. The United States in particular benefited enormously, in spite of the propaganda that you hear. The United States benefited enormously from the success of China in the 90s, 2000s, and early 20-teens. And the United States will miss that benefit, will suffer, as China is no longer a real engine of production, no longer a real engine of growth, no longer a real engine of increasing productivity and lowering cost of goods. Now, that's still happening. It's just happening on a lower scale. Now, it could be that other countries step in to replace China. We can hope. But you need global trade to sustain the American wealth, to sustain the American lifestyle. You need global trade to sustain the high standard of living that Americans have become used to. And without it, Americans will suffer. Americans will suffer. Now, we have two administrations, Biden and Trump, who both think that somehow crippling the Chinese economy. I mean, it could be that that's the right strategy from a national security perspective. Now, India might replace China, but there's very little evidence that that's happening. Very little. Indeed, the country that is actually replacing China is Mexico. Mexico is now our largest trading partner. It's passed China as the largest trading partner. And you will see more from India, but also from Vietnam and from Indonesia and from Malaysia. And maybe one day, if they ever get around to having the right policies, maybe for Africa. But on the flip side of that, if Trump becomes president, as is almost a certainty now, and imposes global tariffs, then global trade, including trade with the United States, will suffer dramatically. And, we will all be worse off for that. That is, it doesn't matter where it goes. If you penalize it, it's going to hurt you. Tariffs hurt us. They destroy our capacity to produce, and they destroy our quality and standard of living. All right, UK. So we talked about Labour. Labour's won. They're going to dominate British politics for the next 5 years. They have such a majority, it's hard to imagine a scenario in which they lead before 5 years. They have complete control over what they do. Now, it's hard to tell what kind of crisis will come about, but for now, it is Labour. And I did mention that, Labour is less radical than it was under Jeremy Corbyn, and some within Labour are more centrist. But there was on one issue, and it's an important issue, there's one issue in which this Labour government is as nutty as anyone on the crazy left is. And this is an issue that the left generally is nutty on. But I think this government has basically staked its reputation on this and stakes its future on this. And that is the issue of climate change and alternative energy. This government is committed to running the largest experiment in the world of basically shutting down conventional, in other words, reliable means of producing energy. In other words, raising windfall taxes on oil and gas, shutting down new exploration in the North Sea. Forget about fracking on the British Isles. There is a ton of natural gas right there under your beautiful British soil. Right there, there's natural gas. Forget about fracking. And instead, and by the way, forget about, it really does look like we'll see what their nuclear strategy is, but whereas the conservatives were dedicated to clean energy, but were investing heavily in nuclear, I don't think these guys are going to invest in nuclear. What they are going to do is they are going to dramatically boost wind, solar, and battery technologies. They're going to go all in on, quote, unreliables. They're going to be all in on expensive unreliables. And this is probably the thing that will really destroy the UK. Because I think everything else, they'll raise taxes a little bit and so on, but it won't be anything to crush you. But they've learned nothing from Germany and Germany's experiment. Nothing. Zero. Indeed, they're doubling up on Germany's strategy. And remember, they're heavily investing in solar. And I know I keep reminding you of this, but I don't know. It seems like somebody needs to remind the world of this. The sun doesn't shine often in the UK. It just doesn't. Sunshine is a rare thing in London and in much of the UK. And yet, the left in the UK is just rushing towards more solar panels, more windmills in the North Sea. You know how expensive those are? You know how difficult they are to maintain? You know how birds, and I hear now whales, they kill? They, according to their manifesto, they want to double onshore wind, triple solar power for when the sun don't shine, and quadruple, 4 times, offshore wind by 2030. They're going to be around almost until 2030, right? They're going to be there until 2029. So they're going to invest in carbon capture, storage of carbon. They're going to invest, storage of energy, hydrogen, and marine energy. Notice no mention of nuclear. This is from their manifesto. This is a clean energy superpower. That's what they want to become. The UK is going to become a clean energy superpower. I mean, the last time the UK was a superpower was before World War II. And this is just going to destroy. They have promised that this clean energy policy is going to create 650,000 jobs by 2030. And of course, that sacred thing called energy independence. Energy independence. Of course, the way they're going to do this is by killing off real energy independence potential, which is the North Sea oil, fracking, nuclear. French are investing heavily in nuclear. But who knows now with the French election. But the French, Macron at least, heavily invested in nuclear. Now we've got a government that is walking away from nuclear, just like the Germans did. And we know how that landed up for Germany. It doesn't matter. The left doesn't care, and this is true of the right too, but they don't care about reality. Facts don't actually matter. What works, what doesn't work, other people looking at what other people have done and the problems they got into won't apply to us. And again, the reason is they're doing the right thing. They are moral. And morality It doesn't matter. Oh, the Germans, they screwed up. They didn't do it right. We'll do it right. We'll do it the way it's supposed to be done. The way it's supposed to be done. So, Britain's in deep, deep trouble. I think of all the issues that the left is bad on, this is probably the worst. They're also going to be bad at transgender. Who knows? We'll have to watch to see if the transgender clinics are reopened in the UK. But the thing that is worst, the worst thing I think in terms of just the survival of the UK is going to be energy policy. All right, one last story, and then we'll get to a bigger story. And that is, I just noticed that Mike Johnson, the Speaker of the House of Representatives, a Republican, was at the Hudson Institute. Oops, what did I do? I didn't mean to do that. Hudson Institute today, giving a talk where he said, he teased, he didn't say, he can't say, he can only tease. Big spending cuts are coming. Quote, I can promise you that come 2025, spending reform would be a top priority for our new Republican majority. They aren't going to be easy conversations. But here's the thing. 76% of all federal spending, and growing, 76% right now, but that grows every single year, of all federal spending goes to Social Security, untouchable according to Trump, Medicare, untouchable according to Trump, Medicaid, untouchable according to Trump, defense, increase according to Trump, veterans, increase according to Trump, and interest payments on the debt. Interest payments on the debt, which, unless somebody somewhere does something amazing, is not coming down dramatically. And the debt only increases. So the interest on the debt only increases. So where are the cuts going to come from? Where are the cuts going to come from? Where are you going to find significant spending reform without touching Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, defense, veterans, and interest? Now, by the way, the Trump administration could have, the Trump Treasury could have changed the dynamics in the first administration. If they had funded all government debt with 30-year bonds, then interest payment on the debt today would be a lot lower because they would have locked in those amazing 2%, 1% interest rates that happened in 2018, 2019. They could have locked them in. But no, our Treasury departments, and this has been going on for decades, fund almost all of the national debt with short-term, under-a-year-old debt, which means that as interest rates go up, interest rate payments on that debt go up. It was such a brainless proposal. I know a number of people that proposed this. It was such a simple proposal to fund the government with long-term debt. China, by the way, is issuing 50-year bonds, and they're managing to sell them at like under 3% interest. I don't quite understand that. Anybody who would buy a Chinese bond at that, I mean, I think the yuan is already overrated, and then you only get 2-point-something%, and for 50 years, and you think China's not going to have inflation 50 years? That seems like a nutty bet. I'm not buying those bonds. Maybe you guys can go buy the bonds. All right, final story is that my favorite group, one of my favorite groups, I have a lot of favorite groups. One of my favorite groups is the National Conservatives. The National Conservatives. The National Conservatives are founded by Yoram Hazony, who I've debated, and I was on on the Malice show with him to continue our debate that we did at the University of Texas in Austin, kind of nationalism versus individualism. Anyway, they are having their annual conference right now. So yesterday, today, and tomorrow is their big National Conservatism Conference. I'm not sure where it is. It's usually in D.C. It's probably in D.C. And usually a lot of really juicy stuff comes out at these conferences that reveals what the right's agenda, the right's prospects really are, and in particular, because these are the right's intellectuals. These are the people who shape the future of the right. So put aside Candace Owen, put aside Tucker Carlson. They're just clowns and popularizers and media personalities that just popularize. And, you can't take them too seriously, we're told. So let's look at the intellectuals, the people who are doing the deep thinking about the future of the right and how it should evolve and where it's going. Where it's going. And, they're very philosophical and they're very unabashed. They tell you exactly what they think. And they are, this is the intellectual part of the right. There are very, very few intellectuals. There are some who are worse than the National Conservatives, but there are very few intellectuals who are not part of this movement. There are very few intellectuals who are better on the right than these intellectuals. Certainly, there are very few intellectuals on the right who support Trump who are better than these intellectuals. This is, right now, the intellectual main thrust within the Republican Party, within the conservative movement, within MAGA. MAGA is not an intellectual movement, but they're influenced by. And of course, we know that ideas ultimately shape history, not emotionalist movements ultimately to ideas. And so it's important to look at the ideas of, I would say, the main elements. And you can see by the number of senators, the number of Republican senators who came to address the National Conservatives, we'll talk about one of them in a minute, to address the National Conservatives, by how seriously our politicians on the right take this movement, take these intellectuals. This is the future, whether you like it or not. But they hate the left, so they're all good, right? Anyway, so what I'm going to read to you, because the conference is happening right now, so I don't have video to show you from any of the talks. There's some short clips I could have done, but the logistics were too hard. So what I've done is basically I checked out the Twitter feed of the National Conservatives conference. They have a Twitter feed, so they're tweeting what's going on. And I'm just going to read you from their Twitter feed. This is not me pre-selecting what to read to you. This is what they are highlighting on their Twitter feed. So this is the stuff they think is important, right? So, Khazoni is the MC. I mean, he's the big shot here. He introduced two of the main speakers at the conference. He introduced them as two of the great Protestant leaders of our generation. So these are the two big Protestant religious leaders. One is the president of the Southern Baptist Theological Seminary. This is Albert Mohler. And the second one is a senior minister of Christ Church, Douglas Wills. Both gave talks and were on a panel together with Khazoni. Albert Mohler's talk was titled, and I'm just going to give you the title, quote, "On the impossibility of a secular conservatism." So all you people who think you can be secular and a conservative, forget it. There is no such thing. And what I found interesting in this National Conservative Conference as compared to the previous two is how much more religious they are this time, how much more explicitly religious they are, unabashedly religious, how bold they are in asserting the link between conservatism and religion without any qualms, right? So, for example, and again, I'm just reading you stuff from the Twitter feed, right? From Twitter feed. So Hazony asks them, what would this mean? They both say, we want America to become a Christian nation. We want America to become, to have a national religion. And that national religion is Christianity. So Hazony says, what would this mean to Jews, Hindus, Muslims in the United States? Douglas Willis says, it would mean Jews are more welcome in the United States because Jews are part of the so-called Judeo-Christian tradition. Abba Mola says, those other religions would be welcome, but a nation cannot exist without specific theological commitments. And others must acknowledge those commitments. The secularist dream is a constitutionalist nightmare, which is completely ignoring and evading the very, very secular nature, not atheist maybe, but secular nature of the American Constitution and of the Founding Fathers. But why let the Founding Fathers or the Constitution stand in your way, in our way? This is a commentary on the panel with these two and Hazony. Just now, much agreement between all three on the absolute necessity of recovering the Christian commitments of the American nation and government. And wonderful to hear Mola, a leading Baptist theologian and public figure, give a wholehearted endorsement of, quote, maximizing the Christian commitments of the state, while still making the distinction between, quote, saints and citizens. Baptists, if you were waiting for the green light to embrace Christian nationalism, you just got it. You just got it, right? That's them, not me. In other words, national conservatism has just wholeheartedly, unequivocally, fully embraced Christian nationalism. Christian nationalism. Before it was kind of hidden. Christianity is important, religion is important. Now it's all out. Explicitly, Christian nationalism is what they're going for. Baptists, if you were waiting for the green light to embrace Christian nationalism, you just got the green light. Go for it. John Davidson, another speaker at the conference, says, there's only one alternative to a Christian nation, and that's a pagan country. By that, I mean the rejection of the proposition that all men are created equal. So either you're a Christian nation or you reject the Declaration of Independence. That's the way they think. Either a Christian nation or there's no Declaration of Independence. There's no such thing as all men are created equal. Again, on the panel with Hazony, Mola, and Douglas Weiss, Hazony asked, can we support the 10 Commandments in the schools? Mola says the simple answer is yes. It's a good thing. Douglas Weiss says, I agree. I'm entirely in favor of that kind of thing. How can a Christian say, no, 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 don't acknowledge God? Abed Mola, during his talk, says, all human conflict ultimately is theological. We face the most insidious attacks on human dignity, the family, the good, the beautiful, and the true. Our answer cannot be less than political, cultural, and theological. He goes on, Christian conservatives can have secular allies, but without an ontology grounded in revealed truth, I emphasize, it will fail. Look to the collapse of liberal Protestantism. It is so accommodationist that it is now a cartoon of the spirit of the age. These are the people we should have a common tent with. We should share a tent with these guys. Now I come to maybe the most important person speaking at the conference. Now, It's 3 days. This is only during the first day and a half. I'm still waiting to see what comes in the next thing. That is my favorite senator, as you know. My favorite senator is Josh Hawley, the man I think that has the potential to really, really destroy this country. Josh Hawley gave a talk. And when this talk goes up online, I intend to listen to it and critique it. But this is the title of the talk. The title of the talk. An Augustinian Assessment of Modern America. An Augustinian Assessment of Modern America. This was one of the keynote speeches. Now, I just want to remind you who Augustine was. Augustine is one of the fathers of the church. He is one of the most important figures in all of Christianity. Basically, Christianity is in a constant battle, has been in a constant battle since Aquinas, between Augustine and Aquinas. Aquinas, relative to Augustine, stands for reason, this world, and this world. He stands for this worldliness, a caring about human happiness, and acknowledging the important role of reason. Augustine rejects this world and rejects reason. And he rejects everything associated with it. He rejects happiness and sex and anything to do with the material world. Augustine rejects reason as a tool by which we know the world. He is very much a Platonist. His use of reason, it means revelation of the forms. Augustine is the one who embedded original sin into the very heart of Christianity. Augustine believes we are all fallen. We are all sinful. Augustine is an authoritarian in his, what's it called? What's the city of God, which is his utopian novel, not novel, his utopian book, where he describes the ideal. There's no freedom. There's no liberty. It's complete authoritarianism. Within Christianity, there is no more evil and destructive a figure than Augustine. It's not an accident that when Luther and Calvin leave the Catholic Church, one of the things they're objecting to is that the Catholic Church has become too obsessed with Aquinas, i.e. Aristotle. What Luther and Calvin are rejecting is the Aristotelianism within the Catholic Church. Now, it's distorted and perverted Aristotelianism, but still. And what they hail is Augustine. Augustine, by the way, does not believe in free will. He is completely 100% committed to the idea that salvation is predetermined. Everything you do in life is predetermined. And therefore, God knows before you are born whether you're going to hell or heaven. It doesn't matter, in a sense, what you do in your life. Both Calvin and Luther believe this. A baby that dies in childhood could very well go to hell. I mentioned this the other day. So it's hard to imagine a more evil a philosophy, to the extent that it's a philosophy, a more evil set of ideas than Augustine's. And yet, Josh Hawley chose to give an Augustinian, he considers himself an Augustinian, assessment of modern America. Now, Senator Hawley is very, very clear about what he believes. Whoops, what did I do? He believes that religion should dominate our lives. I mean, this is some of what he said during the talk. Again, I will try to get a copy of the talk itself and analyze it in more detail. Religion, not the right to practice religion, is what unites Americans. Let me say that again. Religion, not the right to practice religion, is what unites Americans. The elite consensus on religion is wrong. Religion is the great unifier. Really? I mean, that's in direct contradiction to the Founding Fathers, who believed that the right to practice religion, the toleration of different religious practices, intellectual toleration, was what united America. That is freedom of religion, freedom of thought, freedom of speech. That's what united us. Not that we all adhere to religion. Indeed, many of the founders were not religious in that sense. They were deists. Some of them might even have been atheists. He goes on. Christianity is our moral center and provides our most cherished ideals. Conservatives should be defending what makes us a nation, recovering the principles of our Christian political tradition. Instead, we're busy tending the dying embers of neoliberalism. Neoliberalism means free markets, free trade, some semblance of free speech. It means kind of freedom, to the extent that we've achieved it in this country. Christianity is our moral center and provides our most cherished ideals. This is what it's about. And finally, to cap it off, Josh Hawley says, some will say I'm calling America a Christian nation. And so I am. Some will say I am advocating Christian nationalism. And so I am, says Senator Josh Hawley. I've warned you. I've been talking about this for a long time. For a long time. These people want to turn this country into a Christian authoritarian state. They won't admit to the authoritarian part of it, but that's what they want. They want to impose their morality on the rest of us. We can all be here, even if we're not Christians, as long as we acknowledge that this is a Christian nation and play by their rules. This is a senator in the United States Senate, a very popular senator in the United States Senate, a senator that is often in the news, a senator that is a leader within the Republican Party. And this is who we should do common cause with in order to fight the woke. If you think the woke are a problem, these guys are like a million times, first of all, worse, and a million times more difficult to uproot. Just in case you think, okay, maybe Josh Hawley is just about, he's just about Christianity, but really he's a good Republican. He's for markets and he's going to liberate the economy. This was part of his talk. This is a description of the National Conservatives of a section of his talk. He said, Josh Hawley puts corporate tax cuts at the top of a list of economic policy mistakes from the past generation of Republicans. Trump, the one achievement, the one great domestic achievement Trump had was cutting corporate taxes. Josh Hawley says, no, it's one of the biggest economic policy mistakes we've done. Quote, why should labor ever be taxed more than capital? It should not be. He also called for conservatives to embrace private sector unions. So we talked about unions yesterday, the irrationality of them. Remember, we talked about the elevators. The right, the Josh Hawley right, the dominant strand of the right, wants you all to embrace unions. We want stronger unions. We want more unions. The elevator construction unions, those are private sector, not public sector unions. Anyway, there we are. That is the National Conservative Movement that I've been talking about, warning you about since they got formed. We've talked about them in great detail over the over the last few years, and it just gets better. They just get more consistent. They just get more explicit. All right. Thanks to all the super chatters. Let me thank Wes for the sticker and Mike for a sticker. Wes, $50. Mike, $20. Thank you, guys. That is great. Let's see who else we have here. Richard, $100. He says, thank you for all you do. Really appreciate it, Richard. Thank you for the $100. That's really helping us getting to where we need to be. Yes, so those are the stickers. Please feel free to jump in with questions, with stickers. We're doing great in terms of where we are on the show, but we don't have a lot of questions. So the show might end abruptly, and we want to make sure that we make our goal. Gail, thank you for the sticker. Really appreciate that. We want to make sure to make a goal. You know, here's a challenge. Yeah, I mean, if you agree with me on the National Conservatives and on kind of the direction the Republican Party and conservatives generally are heading, then, you know, do a $1.99 on the stickers, just to show some support. All right, let's go to questions. David Sussin. Would Naftali, thank you, David, $100 or $93. Would Naftali Bennett be your choice if there were a snap election held tomorrow? He probably would be. I mean, I'm not as engaged in Israeli politics as I would be if I lived in Israel and was voting. So there might be somebody better. I would definitely vote for the, for Sharren Eskel, who I interviewed on Sunday. Now, some of the rumors suggest that she and the political party she's involved in today are going to unite with Bennett and others to form an alternative, relatively secular right-wing bloc. And that would definitely be who I vote for. And then of the people within that bloc, certainly Bennett, but there would probably be others who could legitimately be alternatives to Netanyahu, could legitimately be candidates for prime minister, and good candidates for prime minister. So but Bennett is the first name that comes to mind, but I'm not sure he's the only one. There's the other guy who left Netanyahu's party a long time ago and started an alternative, again, that she is part of. I forget his name right now. He might be an alternative. There might be people within Likud today who might be alternatives. But the one thing that's obvious and clear, that he and nobody in his government, the government that oversaw October 7th, before October 7th and everything that's followed, should be prime minister. Alejandro, thank you. Doug, thank you. Andrew, thank you. Alejandro, same Alejandro, thank you. So $2.99s. John, $4.99, thank you. Lucinda, thank you. Anonymous user, thank you. Ryan Wood, thank you. So, all right, so we're building up. If you support my arguments about the National Conservatives, chip in $1.99 or 99 cents even. Anonymous user maybe can't afford $1.99, but he wants to show support, so he put in 99 cents. That's good as well. Ryan, hi, Ron. I enjoyed your reading the Declaration. I'm reading Brad Thompson's book on it too. Is there a future where one or two states secede from the United States on the basis of the Declaration's principle? I would go there. I can't imagine that happening. Because, in my view, there is nobody of substance in politics, in the courts, as far as I know, nobody out there who has any understanding of the Declaration of Independence. So who would do it? Which state would do it? I mean, it's not going to be Alabama, Mississippi. It's not going to be Florida. It's not going to be Texas. There's just who's going to be? Who is it that understands the Declaration's principles and is willing to secede on that basis? I think the probability of that happening is zero, sadly. There's just no understanding of these ideas, no understanding of these principles. I've said that the Supreme Court, which has some of the smartest people in the world, right? None of them know what the Declaration of Independence actually means. None of them. And none of them would support it today. None of them would sign it today. And those are some of the best people. So I just don't see it. I just don't see who would bring about that secession. I mean, a secession might happen, but it's not going to be on the basis of the Declaration. It'll be on the basis of some, maybe of religion. Maybe some red states will want to be real Christian countries, and the rest of the country won't want that. I don't know. Let's see. John, thank you for the sticker. Really appreciate that. Thank you for the support. Let's see. All right. Philosophy at work. Maribbens, that's all very well for you to drive on the right side of the road, but what about the left? I think that's code for, I don't know. It's code for making fun of Scott, I think. All right. Michael, did you hear the clip of Trump speaking off the record at his golf course? Just cursing and acting like a thug. I mean, yeah, right. I mean, yes, I heard it, but is this surprising anybody? Do you remember the audio tape of him talking about grabbing women by the fill in the blank? I mean, the guy is a thug. He is a disgusting thug. He's nothing but a street thug who dresses up nicely. I mean, that's who he is, but that's who he's always been. No audio that you bring out now is going to change anything because everybody knows exactly who Trump is. And look, his voters want a thug. Scott wants a thug. That's exactly who he wants. He wants a thug. They believe a thug is going to fight the left because you need a thug to fight the left. That's how materialistic, simplistic, shallow they are. But that's who, MAGA knows exactly who Trump is and they don't care. In the contrary, they want him. They want him to be thuggish. He gets extra credit for grabbing women by the, right? I mean, I don't know how anybody votes for somebody who speaks the way Trump speaks. I just don't get it. Now, I get it. The comparison is Biden, the alternative. But also put it this way. I don't know how anybody, put aside votes, because I can understand some people voting for him. But I don't understand how anybody can actively support Donald Trump, given his character. Actively support that? I mean, what does that say about you? To actively support that kind of thuggery. Actively respect that kind of person. To actively support him just shows how, I think, low some of you are. A few of you. Most of you are fine. All right, let's see. Andrew asks, how can Hawley square the Declaration's right to the pursuit of happiness with Augustine's command to experience pain. May God damn him for the attempt. I mean, happiness comes to the extent that you can achieve happiness. It comes from the subjugation of your will, comes from the subjugation of your desires, comes from the subjugation of your values to God. That's what happiness means. That's what happiness is. So it's your pseudo-liberal modern view of happiness associated with joy and achievement of values, including grubby material values, that is problematic. So I don't think Josh. I don't think he has any problem in squaring it. I think he is committed. You know, he wrote a paper that was published about this Christian who, God, I can't pronounce his name, Pelagius, something like that, who actually came just before Augustine, and Augustine was, criticized him because Pelagius actually talked about this worldly happiness, the achievement of this worldly happiness, and he talked about human beings having free will, and Augustine rips into him. So, and Hawley wrote an essay, Pelagius being the enemy of the church, the enemy of man, the enemy because he sought this worldly happiness. It's exactly what Josh Hawley rejects, is what we call this worldly happiness, happiness that is this worldly. What you should find happiness is in salvation, is in the whipping as you're whipping yourself. Yigal Albel, $50. Thank you, Yigal. Really, really, really appreciate it. Thanks. Good work, Yaron. What's your take on Bastiat? I mean, I love Bastiat. Everything I've read of Bastiat, I thought was good. He's a great economist. He's I guess he comes at it very much a legal scholar, an appreciation for kind of how, a deep appreciation for how markets work. Of course, the broken window fallacy that we associate with economics in one lesson is really a Bastiat, a concept brought about by Bastiat. But his just understanding of liberty, understanding of freedom. He's one of the great heroes of liberty, of freedom. He's not perfect, but nobody was before Ayn Rand. Ideologically, but he was as good as it got in the 19th century, and he's one of the few voices in the 19th century advocating for liberty intellectually. And Pelagius believed in free will. Pelagius is the name. Anyway, I'm a big fan of Bastiat's. I think he is definitely one of the good guys. He influenced the better thinkers, I think, among the free market thinkers, among the free market economists, were heavily influenced by Bastiat. Thank you. You really appreciate the first-time super chat and $50. That's amazing. By me, surprised he's not mentioned by me more often. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mostly mention objectivist authors. I don't mention that many non-objectivist authors. But yeah, he's definitely, in the 19th century, he's one of the leading thinkers that are promoting and defending capitalism that's going on around them. He's not super philosophical, but at the level at which he defends capitalism, he does a good job. Frederick Bastiat, yes, Frederick Bastiat. Highly recommend There's a small book. What's it called? The Law? I think a small book called The Law. Fairly easy reads. He didn't write a lot, as far as I know, or I haven't read a lot, if he did write a lot. The Law, yeah, that's the small book. Awesome, awesome book. Capitalist Spy says it's only 60 pages. So there you go, only 60 pages. Yeah, just you can get it on a Kindle or something. And yeah. All right, Michael says, you say we get the politicians we deserve, but do the people of Argentina deserve Milei? Do they actually understand what freedom is that freedom is better? No, I think in Argentina's case, they got something better than they deserve. They don't deserve Milei, and one of the reasons he might fail is because they don't deserve him. That is, he will only succeed to the extent that the Argentine people themselves rise to the occasion. They learn, they grow to deserve him, right? But if they fight him, he will fail. So we will see. I don't have, I know some people were asking about Milei update. I don't have one. I have to go do my research. I haven't seen anything dramatic one way or the other. One way or the other. But yes, from what I can tell, he's achieved some of what he wanted through his Congress. Not everything, far from everything, but he's achieved a little bit. Michael says, what do you make of Robert De Niro and his crusade against Trump? He strikes me as a moron. Yeah, I mean, I'm not particularly interested in actors who get involved in politics. They're not very... They're not, who cares what actors think? They're not very informative. They're not very knowledgeable. They're not very thoughtful. I'm all for anybody who goes on a crusade against Trump. Again, you know my views on Trump. But Robert De Niro is a great actor. That's all I care about, is the fact that he's a great actor. Richard, thank you. Richard just came in with $100. I don't know what he wrote, though. Darth Plagius, who said 2 for Tuesday. I don't understand any of that. So, Richard, you can come and chat and explain it to me. Pelagius is obviously the guy I was talking about, but what is 2 for Tuesday? I don't know what 2 for Tuesday is. The wise, Pelagius, I don't know. All right, maybe somebody will explain this to me. Oh, you gave $100 twice. Thank you, Richard. All right. Thank you. Who showed me this? Kuda Baba. Thank you for enlightening me. Enlightening me. Darth Plagius is a Star Wars thing, obviously, from the Darth. But is there really a Plagius in Star Wars? That's interesting. Yeah, I mean, Hazlitt is better known than Bastiat because, he wrote this book that is more current and relevant to, I think, for a lot of people. It's easier to read, but it's easier to apply in a modern context. It applies to America. But Bastiat's a deeper thinker than Hazlitt. But Hazlitt's really, really good in his economics. When he gets into morality, he's terrible, terrible, terrible. Oh, Anonymous User says, do you have an update on Milei? Otherwise, thanks for the show. I don't, but I will get one for you soon. Maribbens continues with the exchange with philosophy at work. Objectivism is great for the clumsy, but what about the deft? The deft stay deft, I think. I don't think objectivism is great for the deft. I think they stay deft. Ice Pick. Hey, Yaron, did you watch the Lemon Popsicle movies when you were young? Lemon Popsicle. I think I did, yes. They were extremely popular in Central Europe and are still shown on TV from time to time. These are in Israel, in Hebrew? I think they did about teenagers and their first sexual experiences and things like that, if I remember right. I think I did. But it's a very vague, distant memory. John says, do you think Islamic immigration is good for the UK? Given what the UK is doing, no. Absolutely not. And I've said this like a million times in the last 20 years, 24 years, since 9/11. I've said this over and over again. But you guys don't listen. Some of you don't listen. You choose what to listen to. I said that the West needs to declare war on Islamism and crush them everywhere they are. And if we'd done that, Islamic immigration would not be a big deal anyway. I've said that if you declare war on Islamism, then absolutely deny Muslims entry into the United States until the war is over, into any country until the war is over. And Europe should have certainly done that. But short of declaring war, it's very difficult to ban a whole religion, a whole group of people from immigration. But a war declaration needs to happen. The banning is not the key. The banning is irrelevant. What's really key is the war. What's really key is defeating Islamism, primarily at home. I've also said over and over again that the problem is not the migrants, even when they come, even without it. The problem is the locals. The locals do not insist on assimilation. The locals do not enforce the law. They're afraid to offend the Muslims. The locals allow the barbarians to bring their barbarity to the West. But that's the locals' fault, primarily. If you're going to have Muslim immigration, I have no problem with that. Enforce the laws. When they're violent, put them in jail. Throw away the key. If they rape little girls, castrate them, throw them in jail, and throw away the key. If they'd done that to the rape gangs, the Muslim rape gangs that existed, then Muslims coming to the UK would get the lesson. They'd get the message. We either play by the rules here, or we're going to suffer really dire, horrific consequences. If the Germans had prosecuted the immigrants that sexually assaulted German women, if they'd prosecuted them to the full extent of the law, then that would have stopped. If Sweden today stops pretending that the Muslims there are not violent and actually prosecutes them, the violence will end. But if you invite them in, give them a check when they come, which of course they shouldn't be receiving, and then tell them in a sense, yeah, all your behaviors that you had in the old country, they're welcome here. We love them. Then of course they're going to be rotten for your country. Of course they're going to be rotten for your country. So combine the fact that we are too cowardly to declare war on the enemy. We're too cowardly to declare Western civilization as superior. We're too cowardly to enforce our own laws. We're too cowardly to tell them that they have to assimilate. And this is exactly what you get. This is exactly what you get. France is not prosecuting them. There are whole neighborhoods in France that they won't go into, that the French won't go into. France refuses to assimilate them. Of all the countries, France is legendary not letting them assimilate. And the primary way in which you assimilate is through jobs. And yet, most of these Muslims who live in the outskirts of Paris don't work. They get welfare. That's not how you assimilate them. So France has not. If France was actually prosecuting them, there'd be a lot more than 50% of the jails. And it would stop. It would stop. But it won't, because fans won't assimilate them. They're too snobbish to assimilate them. They're too, they've sold out. They're too detached. The French live over here, the Muslims live over there, and never shall the two meet. So there is a strategy of how to deal with immigrants. And America had it right in the 19th century and the early 20th century. They knew how to integrate immigrants. And we don't anymore. We don't anymore. And we suffer the consequences. We suffer the consequences. It's not, I mean, everybody's looking for easy solutions, but the reality is there are none. The solution is hard, and the solution is to resurrect Western civilization. The solution is to advocate for Western ideas, and for that you need to know what they are. And the problem in the West is not Muslims. The problem in the West is not Muslim gangs or the Muslims in prison. The problem in the West is that the people of the West, sounds almost biblical, have forgotten, or in some cases never knew, what it is that makes them special. What are the ideas that make them what they are? How they got free and rich. How they got individualistic to the extent that they are. How they got there, they have no idea. So if you care about Western civilization, you need to be arguing for reason, individualism, and political freedom. Reason, individualism, political freedom, that's what made the West. And to argue instead of building walls, putting people on ships and sailing them back to Africa, if you think that is what will get you greater security in the West, you are delusional. You're delusional. But that's what everybody on the right is. They're all delusional. Because they have no understanding. They have no understanding. This is true of so many people, of the role of ideas in human history. How ideas shape history. I think immigrants shape history, or attitude towards immigrants. No, it's ideas. You want to change the West? You want to cause the West to assimilate immigrants? You want to cause the West to have another, great period of culture and success and wealth and capitalism? Then you've got to advocate for the right ideas, and burying your head in the sand about the ideas and just advocating for superficial short-term solutions is going to get you nowhere. No, some people want to do that. That's fine, but you have to realize you're not going to get anywhere by doing it. All right, Shazbot. Oh, God. I mean, you're making me feel guilty, Shazbot, because you're reminding me of all the stuff that I have not reviewed yet that people have paid me to review. It's all on a list. I'll add this one too. Okay, Shazbot, $250, a lot of money, to review Blackadder 2. Blackadder 2 generally is, Blackadder is one of the great masterpieces of comedy. Blackadder 2, set, I think, in Elizabethan times, is fantastic. Episode Beer, particularly interesting, is in an analysis of the Puritans. Right. I can't wait. This is going to be... I love Blackadder. It's one of my favorite shows of all time, so this is going to be a true pleasure. If you haven't seen Blackadder, do yourself a favor. It's on one of the streaming platforms. It's truly fantastic. Truly fantastic. I see some of you know the episode by heart. That's good. That's good. I like that the listeners to Yaron Brook show know their Blackadder. That is a really good sign of a good sense of life. Ian says he liked Blackadder when he was a teen. It didn't make it into his adult taste. Oh, God. Something happened there, Ian. I don't know. I only discovered it as an adult because I'm old. So, you know, and yeah, I don't know. I've seen probably every show 2 or 3 times, and I love it. Frank, what's your view of Atlas Shrugged's scene where Lillian Rearden reads Hank the riot act for his affair with Dagny? I feel that Ayn Rand is almost sympathetic to her. No, she's not. She's making us seem, I mean, the whole point is Lillian is using every trick in the book to guilt, to try to cause Hank to feel guilty. And it's still working at that point in the book, right? So it's all about Ayn Rand trying to make Lillian seem as credible as possible in terms of guilt. But there's no sympathy for her at all. Zero zilch. I mean, Ayn Rand is 100% in favor of the affair between Hank Rearden and Dagny Tegart. As am I, for what it's worth. Absolutely okay with their, not okay with their affair. Supporting their affair, promoting their affair. Affair is good. Good stuff. All right, Andrew. Josh Hawley is the manifestation of Rand's warning about Reagan's fusion of religion and politics. Yes, I mean, he is the culmination. He is the essence of it. I don't think she could quite have imagined him being where he is today and how successful he is. And look, his partner in crime, J.D. Vance, is, Trump is said to have now narrowed his choice to 2 for VP, and Josh Hawley is, J.D. Vance is one of the 2. And J.D. Vance is not quite as theologically committed and is not quite as sophisticated as Hawley, but he's in that line. He's part of that. He's part of that movement. Christian nationalism, absolutely for J.D. Vance. So he's definitely in that line of thought, and he might be a heartbeat from the presidency soon. I don't think he'll actually be the choice for VP. I think J.D. Vance is too ideological and too smart for Trump. I think he's going to choose the governor of what, North Dakota, who's like who's kind of a nothing, I think is the best way to characterize it, and therefore not a threat to Trump. And he's old. He's not young, so he's the contrast is not there. No, not Noam, not Bilgram. He's going to choose. I think he's going to choose Bilgram because he's the least threatening to Trump. He chose Pence, like the most boring senator in the Senate, and I think he's going to choose Bilgram because he's the most boring governor of all. I mean, when he was on stage in the Republican debates, it was like a non-entity was there. Right? John, have you read Augustine's book start to finish? No, absolutely not. And I have no problem with that, right? I read commentaries on. I'm not a scholar of Christianity. I don't read I haven't read Aquinas's from cover to cover. And yet I read people who comment on them, and people who are experts on the history of Christianity, experts on the history of ideas. I don't need to read every single philosopher who's ever lived. I read people who write about the history of philosophy. There's no end to it if you have to read original sources before you comment on anybody. I just finished an excellent book. I literally just finished it on the elliptical today. The Reawakening of the Western Mind. I mean, I think here are 2 books that I think are a must-read for everybody. A must-read for everybody out there who's interested in the role of ideas in history. who's interested in the role of Christianity in history, who's interested in what Western civilization is. It's Charles Freeman is the author, and 2 books. One is The Closing of the Western Mind, basically how Christianity closed the Western mind, and then The Reopening of the Western Mind, how the Western mind reopened, you could argue, in spite of Christianity. And amazing amount of knowledge, amazing analysis. Don't agree with everything in it, but yeah, if you want to understand history, these are the kind of books you need to read. It is interesting that he refused. I wanted to interview him on the show, and Charles Freeman, and he turned me down. He turned me down because he says he doesn't do interviews, and because he's not a friend of capitalism. He's not pro-capitalism, and that's right. Most of the writers that I read in history that are really good, real scholars of history, are not particularly are typically leftists, like most academics. But typically leftists. All right. Yeah. So no, I haven't read Augustine. I've read about Augustine. I've read. I've listened to lectures about Augustine from people who have read Augustine. But I've read now, I don't know, 5, 6, 7 books recently about Christianity and about the rise of Christianity and about and where Augustine is covered. And I don't find people disagreeing about Augustine. I mean, pretty much everybody agrees about Augustine. I've read what Martin Luther has to say about Augustine, and I don't know if I've read what Calvin has to say, but I've read what Martin Luther has to say about it. Yeah, I mean, I don't find that in the history books that I've read over the years, I have found people disagreeing about Augustine. And indeed, Josh Hawley. I think when you dig down on what Josh Hawley represents and his attack on that guy whose name I forget how to pronounce, Pelagius, his view as Augustine is not different than mine. I just view Augustine as one of the most evil people in all of human history, and Josh Hawley thinks of him as a great hero. That's the fundamental difference. I mean, Andrew says at one point what Augustine stands for anyway. No, but what he stands for and what he said are the same thing. I mean, again, I'm sure there's some Catholics at the margin who have a different interpretation of Augustine, but it's trivial, right? All the scholars I've read have the same interpretation. It's not a big deal. What did Augustine mean? Everybody knows what he meant. Yeah, I mean, the city of God, the relationship between the church and the state. He talks about the relationship between the church and the state and how the state should be subservient to the church. And it inspired much of the inspired the popes. It inspired the development of Catholicism and Christianity. I mean, he was one of the most inspiring figures in Christianity, no question. David, thank you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for the support. Really appreciate it. Colt, interestingly enough, Jay Dyer has blamed Augustine for many problems in Christianity. Augustine got his ideas from his previous religion, Manichaeism and Neoplatonism. Yeah, I mean, Augustine was a Neoplatonist, although there are many historians who say he's not a Neoplatonist because he's not a Platonist because they have a very narrow perspective of Plato. Yeah, John chooses to say, in other words, Yaron just makes stuff up, or Yaron actually reads a lot of books about different figures and tells you what's written in those books. But the idea that as a cultural commentator, I must read all the original sources of everything I've ever commented on is bizarre and ridiculous, and nobody does that. And it would be stupid, and it would be impossible to do it. So John, I don't know why all these dishonest people show up on my chat. It's sad. I mean, partially it's sad because I feel sorry for them because they waste so much time listening to me. when all they do is hate. Yeah, I mean, Jay Dyer is an Orthodox. So he rejects the entire Western Church, rejects Aristotle, rejects Plato. You know, they have their own bizarre theology. Yeah, complete weirdness. Favorite action movie? God, that's tough. Terminator 2? Probably. Does that count? Yeah, it has to be one of them. Lucinda started reading Plato's Republic. Very interesting stuff. Have you read it? If so, any thoughts? Yeah, a long time ago. Yeah, I mean, it is the blueprint for every authoritarian regime ever. A blueprint that Plato actually tried to implement itself in Sicily, where the king there brought him on as to help and try to establish it. I mean, it's based on Plato's idea that we as normal people can't know the truth, can't know what's good for us, cannot know what real reality is, and therefore every aspect of our lives must be guided by the philosopher king, and everything must be managed by him, and everything must be, done by him. So but think about it. Every authoritarian state has basically been modeled after the Plato's Republic. I haven't read any books, John. Not a single book. I haven't read any books at all. I just make stuff up. Whatever I feel like saying, that's what I say. God, you're such an idiot. Apollo, favorite Ayn Rand essay? I don't think I've read any of those either, right? The Objectivist Ethics. I mean, it's so groundbreaking. It's so earth-shattering in terms of my life, in terms of, I think, just everything out there. It's such a seminal work. It's such an important work. It has to be my favorite. Can you get Dr. Cristina LePort on to discuss health? I think I'm going to get her on, but to discuss her novels, which I haven't read because I don't read, but to discuss her novels. And I need to do that. So that will happen when I get back from Europe. Who or what is your statue pointing at? Not pointing at anything. He's sheathing a sword. You don't see the sword because the sword is broken on this version of the sculpture, but he's holding the sword and he's got the thing that the sword goes into, and he's sheathing, he's putting the sword back. The sculpture is David. And he's just chopped off Goliath's head. You can see he's got one foot on Goliath's head, and he's putting the sword back in its sheath. Is that what you say? Andrew, you've been spot on re Hawley. He's dangerous. It's awful to try to reconcile Augustine with Americanism, but it's a sign of intelligence, focusing on fundamentals and tactically pushing his ideology. Yes, I think that's right. I think Hawley is super intelligent, and he's had this agenda, very intellectual agenda, for a long time. I noticed it early on when he became a senator, and I've been warning you guys about him since then. He was also the one who kind of raised a fist in support of the crowd on January 6th as they were getting ready to break into the House and Senate. So he's definitely for that kind of, I think that kind of political violence. I think he's definitely for shaking things up, right? Fighting the left, as Scott would put it. But we know exactly what kind of vision for America he has on the other side of it. Very, very dangerous. Lewis, thank you. Do you see the public protesting against AI in the near future or embracing it to make their lives easier? Well, you'll see both, I think. I think you'll see people embracing it. It still hasn't been embraced as much as I would expect it, but I think it will be. And I think there'll be people really, really upset, particularly when it becomes explicit that people are losing their jobs because of AI. So once you get real job losses, because AI is replacing human beings, then you'll get the protests. So both will happen. Frederick, Prussia pushed Offenbach out to North Spain, 1870. Why? I don't know the history. I don't know Offenbach's biography well enough. Why would they do that? Why would they do that? Why would he go to North Spain? Where did he go in North Spain? San Sebastian? I mean, where was he? Interesting. I'll have to look that up. Apollo Zeus, what happened during the Dark Ages? People got very, very poor. People got very, very poor. There's a really good book. Oh, one of those books that I haven't read. There's a really good book called, there's a really good book called, where is it? God. The Fall of Rome. I've just been, let me just find it. Yeah, there it is. It comes up first because, yeah, so it's called The Fall of Rome and the End of Civilization by Brian Ward Perkins. Brian Ward Perkins is a scholar, I think at Oxford. Somebody who's written about history of antiquity in Rome, and now is writing, I think his next book is about Christianity. Anyway, he wrote a book about the fall of Rome where it's really fascinating because he looks at things like pottery use under the Roman Empire, even in places as far away as England, right? And then pottery use, let's say 200, 300 years after the fall of the Rome. And it just crashes. They can't make pottery. They don't have the knowledge. They don't have the capability. They don't have the civilization to make pottery. He looks at roof tiling. He looks at flooring. He looks at how tall, the ability to build tall buildings. And what he shows is the extent to which the fall of Rome was the end of civilization, at least from a material perspective. Now, you can make the argument Christianity continued, and it did. So from a Christian spiritual perspective, there was growth and new ideas and stuff like that. But all new ideas related to Christianity, not very helpful. But the Dark Ages were brutal. They were brutal in terms of poverty, death, destruction, brutal in terms of child mortality, brutal in terms of the kind of work people had to do. They were brutal in terms of the lack of technological innovation, the lack, basically, for 1,000 years, I think I told you, there were no astronomical observations. Right? The Dark Ages were dark, as he puts it in the title of the book, The Fall of Rome and the End of Civilization. Civilization died. And that's the Dark Ages. And all the rewriting of history that is going on by Christian scholars to try to make out the Dark Ages. Oh, it wasn't that bad. Things were great. Things were actually pretty good. Here's one measure. The population of Rome went from over 1 million people to as low as 10,000. Now, where did all those people go? Well, part of civilization is cities. And when civilization ends, cities disappear, as did the cities throughout the Roman Empire disappeared, and people went out to become subsistence farmers, and they died. The population just shrunk in some places. And it was brutal. It was barbaric. It was violent. It was anarchy. It's a period of anarchy. Rulers fighting each other constantly, the sword being, the most important thing, the standard by which all disputes were resolved, political disputes. So, yeah, Dark Ages were very dark. You know, based on the non-reading that I do. Yep. Brian, thank you for the sticker. Really appreciate it. Apollo Zeus, that we just did that. Jonathan, Catholic versus Protestant again if Christian nationalists win? No, I mean, I think they will, you know, they'll fight it out, but I don't think that'll be the violence. There'll be some reconciliation around Christianity. It's us secularists, particularly if you're an atheist, that are really in trouble. We're the ones really in trouble. I think the religionists will unite, at least for a while. And look, they can't survive for very long, right? Because the economy will crash, everything will crash, and at some point people will rebel against it. Paulo Zeus says, what happened when dinosaurs were around? I don't know. Wasn't here to look, and I haven't read any books about it. Lucinda, thoughts on movie dubbing? Here in Germany, everything is dubbed. In Germany, I refuse to go to the cinema because of it. Even the translation scene in Inglorious Basterds is dubbed fully in German. Personally, I hate it. I'm completely 100% with you. I won't go to see a movie if it's dubbed. I don't mind subtitles. I'm fine with subtitles, even though they are distracting. You're not getting the full theatrical experience, but it's better than dubbed. Dubbed, I mean, it's so awful. It's so. I mean, maybe there's an art to it where they could do it so well that you wouldn't notice. But almost every movie that's dubbed, I find offensive and horrible. So we have the same taste in dubbed movies. I watch a lot of foreign stuff. I just finished a TV show in Greek on Netflix called Maestro in Blue, which was fairly good. I'm looking forward to season 3 coming out in the fall. I like foreign stuff in different languages, but I read the subtitles. If they dub it, I'll skip it. I won't even watch it. All right. The problem with the dubbing is not just the mouth. The problem with the dubbing is the acting. The sentiment expressed in the voice has to be equivalent to what's going on in the scene and to the facial expressions, and that is very hard to do. Very hard to do. Yes, Christopher, I'm definitely capable of reading, but why would I do that? Why would I do it? All right, everybody, thank you. You guys have been incredibly generous. Richard in particular, and Shazbot, David and Yigal, his first contribution was $50, and that was amazing. So thank you guys. Thank you to everybody. We did great today. Paulo Zeus says, have you watched the latest Godzilla movie yet? Yes, I have. I saw, what was it called? Godzilla -1 or something? And I will comment on it, I promise, but not right now. So, yes, for all of you super curious about it, it's a good movie. I enjoyed it. I have watched it. That homework assignment has been done. But I'm still way behind on your music assignments, TV shows, and I still think I owe you a couple of movies, including Brazil. All right, everybody, I will see you soon. Tomorrow's 2 p.m. Tomorrow, 2 p.m. Thursday will probably be 3 p.m. again, Eastern Time. But yes, see you tomorrow. Bye, everybody.